Today we're going to be talking about the ability to improve your weightlifting when it comes to repeatability for conditioning pieces. So often in CrossFit we're going to see competition workouts where you're going to be hitting a high percentage of your max for multiple reps. So if we look back to last year's Open, when we were doing chest to bar pull-ups combined with snatches, and the snatch weight was incremental, everyone hit that sticking point of how heavy is that bar in relation to your max. So for women, that was often around the 155 or 175. For men, it was often the 225 or the 245. And, you know, if you have as a male, if you can snatch 255, well, how comfortably can you hit 245? How often can you hit 245 on a 30-second clock or on a minute clock? So we're going to talk a little bit about how to improve that today.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's interesting about that is that the answer is not always to improve your actual max snatch, right? That in some cases, obviously, if you can't snatch the weight at all, that one rep max needs to go up in order to improve that. But, you know, I had two athletes who both qualified for regionals individually last year who hit PRs at the 175 bar. And then one of them hit it twice, which is insane. That's like not a thing that makes any sense according to general standards and principles of strength and conditioning. But the reality is that type of athlete who's very good at recovering and repeating high percentage lifts is going to potentially be able to set a personal record on a snatch at the end of a very fatiguing workout where they're doing tons of chest to bar pull-ups and tons of moderate and heavy-ish snatches leading into that. Kind of bizarre, right?
Yep. So we're gonna take a look at some programming here in terms of methods for training that side of things, and it's important to remember that, as Todd kind of spoke to there, it's not always that top number that makes the difference. So when you're training this kind of thing, if you're never getting above 90%, that's okay in this. Like, the goal is not to be maxing out every day. The goal is to be improving that repeatability. So Todd, do you want to talk us through this piece of programming?
Yeah, sure. So when we look at this repeatability in conditioning types of workouts, there's a lot of different ways to potentially train that, and there's a lot of different fatigue mechanisms that can come into play. So one of the main things that I'm considering is how quickly can someone recover between a challenging lift, right? So if you look at someone, again, who's relatively good and talented in repeatability, they're going to be able to do a lift, say on a movement like a snatch, between 80 and 90% of their one rep max, and they're going to be able to recover and do that lift again within 5 to 10 seconds. Whereas if you look at someone who's not as good in that type of movement, it's going to take them quite a bit longer, right? They may take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, etc., to be able to recover to actually do that again without blowing themselves up. So if we look at part D for this training session right here, this is sort of a forced rest type of situation where we're going every 30 seconds for 5 minutes and doing a power snatch. And the goal here is to build over that 5 minutes. And then if you sort of think through, okay, what is setup time, etc. on the power snatch, we're looking at doing it on 20-something seconds of rest, right? So that's long enough that someone who's relatively good at recovering between challenging lifts should be able to actually build pretty significantly over 5 minutes. And then, since we're starting to try to train more of this, okay, we want you to be able to not just go on intervals, but we want you to be able to do more fatigue-based training. We're going right into a 1-minute AMRAP of power snatches at that final weight. So the goal here is to build to something challenging on short rest and then do 1-minute AMRAP and sort of push yourself to the point of being like, okay, this is actually challenging and I may miss a lift. And again, we're looking at, okay, what is someone going to be able to do for 1 minute at a heavy-ish weight? And if you're looking at someone who's pretty good and pretty able to recover between these challenging lifts, right, they're going to hopefully be getting minimum 6 reps, right? 1 rep every 10 seconds. That would be the minimum that I would want to see. And you might even see someone who's able to do more than that at something that's relatively challenging for them. But then we're kind of looking at this as a almost superset type of situation where then they go right back into, after resting a minute, every 30 seconds for 5 minutes. And the goal there is for them to be able to keep moving under fatigue while still hitting heavy-ish power snatches, right? So we're thinking here not just, all right, do something that's challenging with minimal recovery, then push yourself a little bit, and then rest 10 minutes, and then do something different. We're looking at training not just that ability to do the challenging weight, but then the ability to recover while still moving. Because again, if we're looking at a longer conditioning piece, say that snatch chest to bar workout, okay, cool, you did a bunch of snatches that were hard for you. Now you have to do chest to bar pull-ups, and we want to see you able to recover to be able to snatch again during that chest to bar piece. So in this case, we're just kind of sticking on the barbell and going back to that every 30 seconds for 5 minutes, and hopefully being able to keep moving and keep doing something challenging, but generate some recovery throughout that process.
Yeah, and I think one thing to talk about here is, in terms of making something more challenging, there are basically 3 ways that you can be doing this. It can be increasing loading, increasing fatigue, or decreasing the time. Okay? So if we were to take those snatches and we were going to repeat the same structure the following week, what happens when we put it as every 27 seconds or every 25 seconds? Okay, we're looking at the same loading. Or what if we keep the same time domain, we keep the same rep scheme, but we're trying to increase every lift 5 pounds from last week? Or if we want to create that more fatigue, well, let's do every 30 seconds for 6 minutes or 7 minutes. Or maybe we do something aerobic running right into this, or something maybe a little more fatiguing running right into this. Looking at different ways to challenge the difficulty of that piece. And in terms of a long-term progression, there's a lot of ways that we can vary that work.
Yeah, exactly. There's all kinds of ways to change the stimulus of something like this, and the reality is for a sport like CrossFit, you're looking at creating varied environments because you don't actually know what the test is going to be. And you have this understanding that the ability to recover between heavy lifts under various forms of fatigue, whether that's, okay, you had to row a whole bunch so you're breathing heavy and your heart rate's out of control, or you had to do a high volume of handstand push-ups so your shoulders are fatigued, or you had a bunch of deadlifting so that your low back is a little bit shot. There's all these different options in terms of why you may be limited in terms of the weight you're able to snatch and why you're able to repeat it. So we're just sort of thinking through, how can we challenge this specific trait, and then how can we add in other varied pieces to prepare an athlete for the potential of what they might see in a competitive environment.
Yeah. And that's the variety is a spice of life, I've heard before. And I don't think that's more relevant than in this situation, so I think we can all agree.